But I decided I had to change the term codependency. I just did not like it. It was too demeaning, derogatory, and had too much of a negative stigma. So I created the term self-love deficit disorder, SLDD. I changed codependent to self-love deficient, or SLD. A lot of people who follow me go, what's an SLD? And then I created the cure. The solution is self-love abundance, SLA, and the person who's cured is self-love abundant. To get to the cure, you have to follow my 10-stage self-love recovery treatment program. I love my acronyms. That self-love recovery is SLR. Self-love recovery transforms SLDD, codependency, into self-love abundance, and it's a cure. There are certain medical conditions that can be cured. I have ADD. There's no cure. I take a pill in the morning. When it starts to wear away, I drink caffeine. I had bronchial infection. I took antibiotics. It was a cure. This is a cure. If you follow this program, self-love deficit disorder is solved. The question is, why did the codependency cure need to be created? I mean, yes, I wrote a book, and I can't tell you how many times. I did the human magnet syndrome training, and I'm not exaggerating, 70 times. 76-hour seminars. And every seminar, all the time, okay, this is great, but when are you going to tell us what to do? And I'm like thinking, well, let me first tell you what this is about, because in my mind, I had this order. I was going to tell you what this is about, and then I had to wait 5 more years to rewrite the book. And I have been working on the cure before I even came up with the human magnet syndrome. And what I mean by that is I've been a psychotherapist, and I've been working with codependents and SLDs before I even started calling them codependents or SLDs. So why did the cure need to be created? Think of a codependent, whether it's you or someone you know, who has finished therapy or who has been in it for more than a year. So I want you to think of at least one, maybe two. You got that codependent? Now, this is a codependent that does not follow my work. Is this person still with the narcissist? How can codependency or SLDD be resolved if they're still with the narcissist? Can an alcoholic be in recovery if they are drinking? No, they're relapsed. What percentage of the codependents terminated their relationship with the narcissist because of their therapy? Now, if you knew a bunch of codependents or SLDs, you would have a very low percentage. What we have is this therapy that doesn't really get to the core of the problem, because if you got to the core of the problem, you would realize the relationship can't be sustained. Did they return to him or her? And if they did they immediately go back? Or did they immediately rebound to the next soulmate, or who's going to become the cellmate? So the issue is, and this is what I've been fighting for ever since I started this work, is that we need to not only define the problem, we have to understand what causes it, and then we have to find a solution to the cause, because if codependency really is about an addiction, it's about core shame, about trauma, the only way that we solve it is we work on it. Codependency treatment doesn't work. First of all, the definition of codependency is it just makes no sense. Google it, and you'll find pages upon pages of what codependency is. And everyone will say something different. Even before I wrote the human magnet syndrome, I tried to define codependency before I came up with self-love deficit disorder. The treatment is antiquated. The treatment that we know of comes from the 1980s addictions movement with co-addiction, co-alcoholism, adult children of alcoholics. Simply, the outcomes are horrible. I get a lot of comments. Now, I can't respond to most of them, but I try to read as many as I can. They have the same thing. I don't know what to do. I'm in therapy. I have nowhere to go. The therapy out there just doesn't work. So if you are in codependency therapy and the person actually says they're a codependency specialist, the probability is high that the outcome is going to be negative. If you do leave the narcissist, there's going to be a relapse. If you try to leave the narcissist, there'll be a relapse. And if you do, you're going to find the next narcissist. In order to come up with an explanation, it has to make sense and it has to fit everyone. The codependency theory out there, if there is one for therapy, is black and white and one-dimensional, or there's none. So if you are in therapy and you have SLDD or codependency, and you ask your therapist, so what is your theoretical orientation towards codependency treatment? What are the steps in solving it? You will get an interesting answer because there really is no established, agreed upon treatment protocol for codependency treatment. It's because the term and the condition itself, it doesn't exist. It's a name for a problem that is defined in such large scale that you have no idea what the problem is. So what happens is we have a lack of treatment outcomes. We have insular treatment methods. And I use the word insular because I think of insulated, I think of island. We have treatment methods that people believe in, but they're not connected to anything else. They're connected to this program, this coaching method, this therapy method, EMDR, cognitive behavioral therapy, all legitimate psychotherapy techniques, but they're not connected to the bigger picture of codependency. So I call this Frankenstein treatment. It's putting together disparate parts to try to make something whole. So that if you're with a therapist who believes they're a codependency specialist, they're kind of using all these different things hoping that it'll work. Until I started my work, it had not been really clear that trauma has been established as the cause. Now, that is true and that is not true. Let me first tell you why it's not true. It's not true because, remember, I came up with this stuff because of what I learned in the 80s and the 90s, reading things from Terry Kellogg, John Friel, even stuff by Melody Beattie, John Bradshaw, that were talking about other issues and disorders that made sense, but no one made the distinct connection into codependency. A third of us are therapists. How many of us ever took a class in college on codependency? It's a joke. Of course not. We didn't take one. Most of the books on codependency are old and outdated, and they just say the same thing over and over again. There are some good ones out there. Like a guy named Burns, The Dance of Wounded Souls or something like that. He talks about codependency and trauma. So there are books out there, but some of these books are hard to follow. They're real esoteric, and they don't really clearly outline a problem, explain the solution, and tell you what to do. Sadly, most of the explanations of codependency are it's a weakness. It's a family of origin problem. Trauma has not been universally established as the cause of codependency. People have not come up with an explanation on how to solve it. Therefore, codependency treatment doesn't work. Therefore, codependency treatment does more harm. Say you're Jewish and your rabbi lies to you. All of a sudden, or it could be Catholic or Lutheran or any religion, all of a sudden, the place, the institution that's supposed to help you lets you down, and you lose faith in the world and you lose hope. Now, that's a severe example. What happens if you go to therapy and your therapist doesn't have a clue and accidentally keeps saying, well, you can do it, and when you don't, you go back and you start analyzing what is wrong with you and why didn't you do it? Even if they're nice about it. It doesn't work, you stop therapy, and then some of us, we lose faith in therapy. We don't know where to go, and if we lose faith in the institution of therapy, where are we? And I think for many SLDs, that's where they're at. They've lost faith in the field of psychotherapy. Therefore, codependency treatment doesn't work and accidentally causes more harm, even if she's really sweet and kind, or he, and every time you feel you can say anything and they remind you of the mother or father you never had, and you come back and you still get beaten up every time, go talk to your hairdresser and save some money. By the way, I do not want to disparage psychotherapy. I am talking about psychotherapy for self-love deficit disorder. SLDD is complicated. If you are depressed and you're grieving, that's not nearly as complicated, and most therapists that are good are going to help you. The problem is Band-Aid therapy. If codependency is, if you believe me, it's because of attachment trauma, core shame, addiction, and it's a wound, and the wound is deep, and you keep covering it up with a Band-Aid, well, first of all, the Band-Aid is not going to make it heal. You need to go to the doctor, you need maybe surgery, it's going to hurt, but the Band-Aid falls off. and you put another Band-Aid on and it falls off. Codependency is a bunch of symptoms. It's not the problem. So when we go into therapy seeking help for codependency, we talk about, I'm being gaslit. He's always making fun of me. I'm always taking care of everyone else. No one's taking care of me. And that becomes a discussion. Well, that's the Band-Aid, because that's not dealing with the underlying wound. Effective therapy requires the treatment of the wound. Band-Aid therapy gives symptom relief, not problem resolution. I've had plenty of Band-Aid therapists that made me feel good after the session because I finally had someone to talk to that I felt safe with, that validated me. But they didn't give me any idea why I keep falling in love with narcissists, marrying them, and why I keep repeating that cycle over and over again. The therapist and the client are oblivious to relapses. So you're in therapy with a codependent therapist, and it's accidentally Band-Aid therapy because most therapists are good and they don't mean harm. Even if they get Band-Aid therapy, they still can be really good, just maybe not at codependency. And how could they be good at codependency treatment if they don't know what it is? When the SLD or the codependent relapses, everyone's surprised because they don't have a theory for it. Roughly 75%, I believe in 18, I'm making up the dates, but maybe I'm 10 to 20 years off. Roughly 75% of most people that had surgery died. We did not yet understand cells. We didn't know what a cell was. We didn't know what bacteria was. We didn't know, of course, what a virus was. So without knowing about bacteria and infection, the doctor's only explanation for the 75% chance of mortality was people had it in them to either survive or die. It was just the nature of surgery. And most people died in surgery because of cellology. Someone will Google it and give me the right word. They found out what a bacteria is, and they found out, well, bacteria is because of unsanitary conditions. And once the surgeons learned that they had to wash their hands and sterilize everything, almost immediately it went from 75% to 25%. And we're talking for a millennial. These millennials are everywhere. A millennium, people were doing surgery. The same thing is with codependency, is that without knowing what it is, and people relapse, people they don't know why.